Your in-depth look at local news. ABC 6 News at 6:30.
Right now in this half hour, a Byron man is facing several charges for allegedly stealing a van and then taking off from police earlier this year. He was in court today. We'll let you know what happened. Plus, current Rochester Police Chief Roger Peterson handing over the reins to the person who will be filling his seat for the time being. But first tonight, we are following up on that lawsuit filed by a group of parents at the state capitol this week who say Minnesota Child Protection Services doing more harm than good in some cases. Thanks so much for keeping it with ABC 6 tonight. I'm Betsy Singer. The lawsuit is being led by a parent who says the laws are unconstitutionally broad and vague, especially in Minnesota. He lost his children for 22 months, taken by Child Protective Services, based on allegations and the discretion of social workers. Dwight Mitchell is that parent. He said that he did not see his 3 sons for close to 2 years. He also says it's all because of false allegations of abuse. Now, his case is complex, but it does stem from a spanking incident back in 2014, during which Mitchell says he was merely disciplining his child, certainly not abusing him. He alleges that unconstitutionally vague and overbroad child protection laws allowed in the state of Minnesota and Child Protective Services and Dakota County Social Services were able to then take away his children based solely on the allegations. Dwight Mitchell is here with me tonight, and we thank you for coming down to talk more in depth about this. This is a very important topic. Let's start with what happened in 2014. It sounds like a simple spanking incident, but I don't think anything with disciplining our children ends up being simple. What happened?
My son had been misbehaving.
He was 10.
He was 10 at the time, and so had gotten calls from school, so he was on punishment. When I say punishment, he was grounded. I had taken away his Xbox, his iPod. I put that in my room. I hid it so that he wouldn't have access to it. He decided to disobey me and go retrieve the items. So there were consequences to that once I found out. So what I found interesting is that in Minnesota, the statutes are so low. The statutes are set that the bar is so low for any parental discipline outside of talking in timeout. So in essence, if you do anything, or and when I say anything, it can be, if you get expelled from school, I'm going to spank you. As most parents would be upset if their child got expelled from school. Well, social services can come in and take your child just for you saying that. Mind you, you could have never touched your child in 10 years. So this was the first time my son had actually been disciplined, and he was 10 years old. And so for that one incident, social services came in, fabricated evidence of long-term abuse that they knew was false because they had requested records from New Jersey, official records. So they knew almost immediately that the grounds were false and that I was not an abuser. Yet they still decided at their discretion to hold on to my children.
By going and filing a lawsuit, this has gotten a lot of attention. And this is to an extent that a lot of parents may not go to. So how did we go from this in 2014 to then a lawsuit? Well,
I thought that the whole situation was bizarre as I was going through it. And
had you ever been accused of abuse in the past? Have you ever been in jail? Do you have a past?
No, I was a law-abiding citizen for 53 years. I'd never been in trouble. I was sort of successful. I was a motorcycle racer. I was the national champion in '97. So I've been on TV, and so I've sort of been in the public eye. But I'm a management consultant. I came here to work for CHS to help them do their business process reengineering. So I was a law-abiding citizen, never been in trouble.
Okay.
When I was going through the process, I was sitting there and I'm looking at the majority of the people that were in the room, and no one had lawyers, and it was definitely people that needed help and assistance. And so I thought my case was unique, and as I started talking to other parents, I found that they were in the same situation, and some for even less. And I'm like, well, what did you do? They said, nothing. It was the social worker's discretion. It was neglect. So after I finally got my children back, I tried to put this behind me. I tried to get on with my life. And it just kept weighing heavily on me, the things I had heard and the things I had seen in the stories. And so I started investigating. And the more I investigated, the more I uncovered. I started looking at the Minnesota Department of Health annual reports. I started looking at the budgets. I started looking at the federal funding. I started looking at CPS and how it was run. I said, you know, why would you give me back my 6-year-old son almost immediately, but not give me back my 10-year-old son? Why would you hold him for 22 months? You knew my household was safe because you had already returned the 6-year-old. So, you know, it wasn't making sense to me.
Right. So what was that telling you? That
something was wrong in the system.
Yes.
You know, and it didn't make sense. So I finally requested my discovery, or my files, and I got approximately 600 pages. And as I went through the files, I saw that the social workers were fabricating evidence and submitting false information to the court in order to retain custody of my child. And I couldn't understand it. So they had told my son that I had abandoned him in Minnesota. They told me that my son didn't want to come home. And it wasn't until I started going through the records that I saw the manipulation that was going on. And so I said, why would they be doing this?
And there's a why behind that.
Yes.
And you found out. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back and we'll find out that in just 2 minutes.
You're watching ABC 6 News at 6:30 with Betsy Singer and ABC 6 Chief Meteorologist Chris Kubal.
Well, again, I am with Dwight Mitchell. He is from the Twin Cities area and recently filed a lawsuit against the state and the county in which your children were taken, in the county in which you were living. You lead the group Stop Child Protection Services from Legally Kidnapping Children. Mm-hmm. But as you were talking before the break, your children being taken away and then your 6-year-old was able to come back, yes. But yet it must have still been deemed unsafe by the agency because they kept your 10-year-old.
Yes.
Okay, and you think that is why? Is this a money thing?
It's a money thing. It's federal funding. So because of my background, the first thing I started examining were the financials. Mm-hmm. So I actually started looking at DHS financials. And I was trying to understand the process, because they were actually sending me bills also. And I'm like, well, why are you sending me bills? So when I looked at the budget, and the budget is staggering. It's $16 billion a year. That's the budget for DHL. It's one of the largest in the government. Mm-hmm. But then I looked at the federal funding. And so the federal funding is about $10 billion. And the funding comes by social services billing back the federal government. And it's called the Targeted Case Management System. Mm-hmm. So when I dropped into the system and started examining it and started from a forensic level, so to speak, I uncovered that they were billing back the government for the foster care. They were billing back the government for the social worker. They were billing back the government for all services. So there are vendors set up, doctors, lawyers, psychiatrists. And so I said, my son doesn't need a psychiatrist. You know, why are you sending him to a psychiatrist? Oh, well, the psychiatry isn't for your son. It's for us separating your son from you. And I'm like, so you're causing the problem in that you're billing the federal government for psychiatric services for something you caused. And so this is why I say they became the child abusers for me.
Okay, now I do have to go here because having been a respite care provider, which I have been. My parents were foster parents for a long, long time. So I do know Child Protective Services does a lot of great things and does take kids out of horrible situations. That is not what we're talking about.
That is not.
We are talking about your case and other parents who say, you know what? You took them out and then you're billing me on top of it and billing the government. And these are things that you found in your case. That is correct.
And so all of these things are actually on our group page. So I actually put the complaint on the group page so that everyone could look at, what was actually filed and the evidence. So this is official Dakota County documentation, so it's nothing I made up, and it's like, here's what they were saying and here's what they're doing. I have the annual report, so anything that someone is looking to see, I can readily provide. You can go onto the internet and Google all of this, so it's not hidden.
Yeah, I found a bunch of it.
It's public policy.
That's right. I looked at a lot of this, and the documentation that has been put together on this is extensive. You have done a lot. What led you to go this deep into it? Once you got your 10-year-old back, a lot of parents would say, this system is too big to fight.
Well, everyone kept saying that to me, including my family attorney. Just try and get on with your life, and you got your kids back and leave it alone. And about, I guess about a year and a half into it, I couldn't let it rest. I mean, it was just bothering me. And so last year I started a self-help webpage for people that get involved with CPS. I put down a lessons learned. I started a petition. I spoke before the Governor's Task Force for Child Prevention. I contacted all the legislatures in Minnesota who were on that task force. I set up several meetings, all with the purpose of trying to help the parents of Minnesota. I didn't want anyone to go through what I went through.
Right.
And when I saw how easy it was and how unconstitutional the statutes were, I said, someone has to do this. And God, I feel, gave me the financial means, the equilibrium, the task of disseminating this information. When I found out that 30,000 children are being put in to the CPS system annually, and that last year it increased by 10,000. So the legislation changed last year and they started taking even more children. So when I found that they took 10,000 additional on top of the 30, and that Minnesota is actually the 6th highest state in the union as far as removals. So they're number 6. They take more children, than almost any other state out of 52 states.
But knowing people who are in child protective services, we have a drug problem that is out of control, and parents who shouldn't be parenting at this point. So I do know that there are kids who are taken out, but then there are cases like yours.
Well, this is indicative of the 30-year social experiment that's been going on. If you really step back and say, okay, we said we're going to take discipline out of the schools, out of the households. It's no longer acceptable to discipline your children. And that was 30 years ago. And so what has come out of that social experiment? Well, in the last 20 years, we've had all these high school shootings. Children don't respect their parents. There's a total lack of authority. The students are fighting teachers, and they're having arguments with teachers. Teachers are afraid to go to school. We weren't having this prior to this no discipline. And so I'm trying to, I suppose, get back to where we were 30 years ago, where we didn't have all this violence, and we didn't have this drug problem. I feel that there are a lot of children that are consumed by the video games, the phones, all of these things we didn't have. And so I think we need to turn back the clock a little.
Let me put on the interview today, which will be put on our website, links to your Facebook page, and ways to get a hold of you. So people, I wish we had more time, that we could talk more, but good luck in the rest, because the lawsuit was just filed. Yes. You still have a long road ahead of you. We do, but we're seeking injunction. So we're actually, our first injunction is to temporarily suspend DHS Child Protection Services. So we're actually going to file that, and we're going to say you have 120 days to fix these unconstitutional statutes. Dwight, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be back.